Myoho-renge Kyo Nam Myoho-renge Kyo Nam Myoho-renge Kyo.
So we continue, stop the vibration here, with establishing the correct teaching for peace in the land. And Nichiren is talking about a widespread acceptance of Nembutsu and derivation from Shakyamuni's teachings about studying broadly all of the Buddhist teachings. And Honen, a priest before Nichiren, who really disregarded all of the teachings in favor of just a couple that he thought were primary. And that simplified things for him. It was a political move to distinguish his sect, his teaching, from others. Several sects derivated from Honen, but they all followed the basic true word, true land. Nembutsu is an umbrella term for all of those that chant Amida or Amitabha, a Buddha, a fictional Buddha that represents this other place, this enchanted land, complete mysticism, and truly unfortunate that the scholarship of Buddhism was just cast aside in order to manipulate people and leaders at the time, the shogunate. So we'll just keep going. He's quoting several of Honen's teachings to demonstrate to his interlocutor that this is the way people are manipulated. Kind of like we talk about the media today and how capitalism has this great mechanism of compliance by pushing consumerism at every corner. It can be very overwhelming and manipulate people into doing things that they wouldn't normally do. So this is what he's doing here, and I will continue. Honen also states, quote, regarding the passage that says that the practitioner of the Nembutsu must possess three kinds of mind. Again, there are notes in the back of each chapter, and you can go look all of these up. If I start doing that with all of these, I'll give you an example here. We'll be here. I'll never get through all of the Gosho. Oh shoot. Well, I guess I won't read you an example. So I'll leave it to you to look that up. It is found in the Meditation Sutra. In his commentary on that sutra, Shandao says, someone may ask, if there are those who differ in understanding and practice from the followers of Nembutsu, persons of distorted and mistaken belief, how should we confront them? I will now make certain that their perverse and differing views will not cause trouble. These persons of evil views, with different understanding and different practices, are compared to a band of robbers who call back the traveler who has already gone on one or two steps along his journey. In my opinion, when this commentary speaks of different understanding, different practices, varying doctrines, and varying beliefs, they are referring to the teachings of the sacred way, which he's already defined, Honen has, as all of the Mahayana, other Mahayana and Hinayana teachings. Just discarding all that scholarship and saying these are the only merits, these are the only sutra that merit. Which is also, there are sects doing that with the Lotus Sutra, which is the ultimate sutra, but they pound into their membership, their students, that shouldn't read anything else, that's it. It's the same mistake. It's not perhaps as egregious, but it is the same mistake. In order to understand the Daimoku, the value of Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, you can't just chant Namo Myoho Renge Kyo and wait for some mystical enlightenment. It's important to understand Buddhism is a science of the mind. It's for us to understand how our mind works. And just blindly chanting, I'm not knocking it. It may be that is what we need to do. I was told by a senior member one time, be a mindless Buddhist. You know, sometimes when you're in your human monkey mind and you're just overwhelmed with your situation and you don't know what to do and you're panicking, sometimes you have to be a mindless Buddhist. Just go sit in front of the Gohonzon and chant until you calm down. But then what happens when you calm down? Now, you're communicating with your Buddha mind, but do you understand that? Do you know how to appreciate it? How to hang on to it? That requires study. And if you study, as Shakyamuni told us, and Nichiren reinforces, study broadly, study all the Buddhist teachings. Not all of them have the same value, but cumulatively, when you're chanting Na and Mu and Myo and Ho, and you're perceiving, along with each of those vocalizations, the depth and breadth of the meaning behind those words. Again, Buddhism is about intent and meaning. I'll get back to this. Finally, in a concluding passage, Honen says, if one wishes to escape quickly from the sufferings of birth and death, one should confront these two superior teachings and then proceed to put aside the teachings of the sacred way and choose those of the pure land. Heavy propaganda. And fake news, fake news. And if one wishes to follow the teachings of the Pure Land, one should confront the correct and sundry practices and then proceed to abandon all of the sundry and devote one's entire attention to the correct, because this is the only correct. When we examine these passages, we see that Honen quotes the erroneous explanations of Tuan Luan, Dao Zhou, and Shan Dao, and establishes the categories of the sacred way and the Pure Land teachings and of the difficult to practice and the easy to practice ways. He then takes all the 637 works in 2,883 volumes that comprise the Mahayana teachings of the Buddha's lifetime, including those of the Lotus Sutra and the True Word Sutras, along with all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and the deities of this world, and assigns them all to the categories of the sacred way teachings, the difficult to practice way, and the sundry practices, and urges people to discard, close, ignore, and abandon them. With these four injunctions, he leads all people astray. On top of that, he groups together all the sage monks of the three countries of India, China, and Japan, as well as the students of Buddhism of the 10 directions, and calls them a band of robbers, causing the people to insult them. Intent. In doing so, he turns his back on the passage in the three Pure Land Sutras, his own sutras. Not of his making, but the ones he adheres to. The sutras of his own school, which contains Amida's vow to save the people, excepting only those who commit the 5 cardinal sins and those who slander the correct teachings. More fundamentally, he shows that he fails to understand the warning contained in the 2nd volume of the Lotus Sutra, the heart and core of the entire body of teachings the Buddha expounded in the 5 periods of his preaching life, in which reads, if a person fails to have resolute mind and conviction, but instead slanders this sutra, when his life comes to an end, he will enter the Avicii hell. Now, we have come to this latter age, when people are no longer sages. Each enters his own dark road, and all alike forget the direct way. How pitiful that no one cures them of their blindness. How painful to see them taking up these false beliefs in vain. As a result, everyone from the ruler of the nation on down to the common people believes that there are no true sutras outside the 3 Pure Land Sutras, and no Buddhas other than the Buddha Amida with his 2 attendants. Once there were men like Dengyo, Gishin, Jigaku, and Chisho, who journeyed 10,000 miles across the waves to China to acquire the sacred teachings, and there visited the mountains and rivers to pay reverence to Buddhist statues and carry them back. In some cases, they built holy temples on the peaks of high mountains in which to preserve those scriptures and those teachings and statues. In other cases, they constructed sacred halls in the bottoms of deep valleys where such objects could be worshipped and honored. As a result, the Buddha's Shakyamuni and medicine masters shone side by side, casting their influence upon present and future ages, while the Bodhisattva's space treasury and earth repository brought benefit to the living and the dead. The rulers of the nation contributed districts or villages so that the lamps might continue to burn bright before the images, while the stewards of the great estates gave their fields and gardens as an offering. But because of this book by Honen, this Nembutsu chosen above all, the Lord of Teaching, Shakyamuni, is forgotten, and all honor is paid to Amida, the Buddha of the Western land. The transmission of the law from Shakyamuni Buddha is ignored. And Medicine Master, the thus come one of the Eastern region, is neglected. Attention is paid only to the 3 Pure Land Sutras in 4 volumes and all other wonderful teachings that Shakyamuni expounded throughout the 5 periods of his preaching life are cast aside. If temples are not dedicated to Amida, then people no longer have any desire to support them or pay honor to the Buddhas enshrined there. If priests are not practitioners of the Nembutsu, then people quickly forget all about giving those priests alms. As a result, the halls of the Buddha have fallen into ruin. Scarcely a wisp of smoke rising from their moss-covered roof tiles, and the priests' quarters have become empty and dilapidated, the dew deep on the grasses in their courtyards, and in spite of such conditions, no one gives a thought to protecting the law or to restoring the temples. Hence, the sage priests who once presided over the temples leave and do not return. They have no food, they have no support. And the benevolent deities who guarded the nation depart and no longer appear. This has all come about because of this Nembutsu chosen above all by Honen. How pitiful to think that in the space of a few decades, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of people have been deluded by these devilish teachings and in so many cases confused as to the true teachings of Buddhism. If people favor what is only incidental and forget what is primary, can the benevolent deities be anything but angry? If people cast aside what is perfect and take up what is biased, can the world escape the plots of demons? Rather than offering up 10,000 prayers for remedy, it would be better simply to outlaw this one evil. This time, the guest was truly enraged and said, in the ages since our original teacher, the Buddha Shakyamuni, preached the 3 Pure Land Sutras. The Dharma teaching Duan Lan had originally studied for the 4 treatises, but abandoned them and then put all his resolute mind and conviction in the Pure Land teachings, similar to the medicine master Tao Cho, ceased to spread the varied practices of the Nirvana Sutra and devoted his attention to propagating the practice that leads one to the Western Pure Land. The Reverend Shando discarded the sundry practices and established a single practice of Nembutsu, and the supervisor of priests, Eshin, collected essential passages from various sutras to form his work, making the single practice of Nembutsu the essence of his teaching. Thus, such was the manner in which these men honored and respected the Buddha Amida. and uncountable numbers of people as a result were able to regain or gain rebirth in the Pure Land. Of particular note was the sage Honen, who as a child entered the monastery on Mount Hei. By the time he was 17, had worked his way through all 60 volumes of Tendai literature and had investigated all the 8 schools and mastered their essentials. In addition, he had read through the entire body of sutras and treatises 7 times and had exhausted all the works of exegesis and biography. His wisdom shone like the sun and moon, and his virtue exceeded that of the earlier teachers. Boy, he's upset, huh? In spite of all this, he was in doubt as to the proper path to emancipation and could not make out the true meaning of the nirvana. Therefore, he read and examined all the texts he could, pondered deeply, considered every possibility, and then in the end, put aside all the sutras and concentrated on the single practice of Nembutsu. So his justification for Nembutsu is that he couldn't understand any of the other sutras? In addition, he received confirmation of his decision when Zhantao miraculously appeared to him in a dream. And he proceeded to spread his doctrines among friends and strangers in all 4 corners of the land. Thereafter, he was hailed as a reincarnation of Bodhisattva great power, or was revered as Zhantao reborn. In every quarter, people of eminent and lowly birth alike bowed their heads in respect, and men and women from all over Japan sought him. There's a lot of mysticism there, isn't there? Since that time, the springs and autumns have succeeded each other, and the years have piled upon years, and yet you insist upon putting aside the venerable teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha contained in the Pure Land Sutras, and willfully speak evil of the passage describing the oath of the Buddha Amida. Why do you try to blame the sacred age of Honen for the disasters of recent years, going out of your way to slander the former teachers of Pure Land doctrines and to heap abuse on the sage Honen? You are, as the saying goes, deliberately blowing back the fur and hunting for flaws in the leather, deliberately piercing the skin in hopes of drawing blood. From ancient times to present, the world has seen such a speaker of evil. Never seen such a speaker of evil. You had better learn a little caution and restraint when you pile up such grave offenses. How can you hope to escape punishment? I'm afraid even to sit here in your company. I must take up my staff and be on my way. Nichiren's response? He smiles, restrained his guest, and said, insects that live on smartweed forget how bitter it tastes. Those who stay long in privies forget how foul the smell is. Here you listen to my good words and think them wicked. Point to a slanderer of the law and call him a sage. Mistrust a correct teacher and take him for an evil priest. Your confusion is great indeed, and your offense anything but light. Listen to my explanation of how this confusion arose, and let us discuss the matter in detail. This should be good. Shakyamuni Buddha expounded the 5 periods of doctrines, established the order in which they were preached, and divided them into provisional and true teachings. But Tuan Lan, Dao Cho, and Shandao embraced the provisional teachings and forgot about the true ones, went by what they had been taught in the earlier period of the Buddha's life, and discarded what was taught later. They were not the kind of men who delve into the deep places of Buddhist doctrine. Honen, in particular, though he followed the practices advocated by these earlier men, was ignorant as to their source. How do we know this? Because he lumped together all the 637 Mahayana scriptures in the 2,883 volumes, and along with them, all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and the deities of this world and urged people to discard, close, ignore, and abandon them. With these four injunctions corrupting the hearts of all people, thus he poured out perverted words of his own invention and took absolutely no cognizance of the explanations put forth in the Buddhist teachings. His is the worst kind of baseless talk, a clear case of defamation. There are no words to describe it, no way to censure it that is not too mild. And yet people all put resolute mind and conviction in this baseless talk of his, and without exception pay honor to his Nembutsu chosen above all. As a consequence, they revere the 3 sutras of the Pure Land and cast all other sutras aside. See, what he's saying isn't that the Pure Land sutras are bad. He's saying that you can't take them alone. To cast all the other sutras aside is specifically non-Buddhist. It's specifically singled out as a polluted practice, an incomplete practice, a misunderstanding of the teachings. And because they do that, they look up to one Buddha alone, Amida of the land of perfect bliss, and forget about the other Buddhas. Remember what I said about Buddhas, bodhisattvas, and deities, and all these things. They're personifications of human potential. So if all you do is look at humans' potential for war or violence, then you breed a society of war and violence. A man such as Honen is in truth the arch enemy of the Buddhas and the teachings, and the foe of sage priests and ordinary men and women alike. And now his distorted teachings have spread throughout the 8 regions of the country, permeating the 10 directions. It's gotten way out of control. You became quite horrified when I blamed an earlier period for the disasters that have occurred in recent years. Perhaps I should cite a few examples from the past to show you that you are mistaken in your feelings. The 2nd volume of the Great Concentration and Insight quotes a passage from the records of the historian that says, "In the closing years of the Chao dynasty, there were persons who let their hair hang down, went about naked to the waist, and did not observe the rites and regulations." The annotations on the Great Concentration and Insight in the second, Great Concentration and Insight, Tendai, was a late 6th, early 7th century priest. So this is like seven centuries before Nichiren. Explains this passage by quoting from Zhou's commentary on the Spring and Autumn Annals as follows, quote, "When King Ping of the Chao first moved his capital to the east, he saw men by the Yi River who let their hair hang down and performed sacrifices in the fields. Someone who had great understanding said, quote, 'In less than 100 years the dynasty will fall, for the rites are already neglected.' From this it is evident that the portent appears first, and later the disaster comes about." The Great Concentration and Insight passage goes on to say, "Juan Qi was a man of extraordinary talent, but he let his hair grow like a mass of brambles and left his belt undone. Later, the sons of the aristocracy all imitated him, until those who behaved in a churlish and insulting manner were thought to be acting quite naturally, and those who were restrained and proper in their behavior were ridiculed as mere peasants. This was a sign that the Tzu-Ma family, the rulers of the Western Qin dynasty, would meet their downfall." Look at what pop stars do today. What they do is followed by throngs of young people. And if they decide to brand themselves and dress in a defiled manner and with disrespect, you have all these young people running around like they think it's fashion. And it's disgusting. It's the same thing with teachings. Similarly, the record of pilgrimage to China and the search of the law by the great teacher Jigaku states that in the first year of the Huanchang era, 841, Emperor Wuzong of the Tang dynasty commanded the priests Qing Chua and Chang Qing Stu temple to transmit the Nembutsu teachings of the Buddha Amida in the various temples. Qing Shuang spent 3 days in each temple, going about from one temple to another without ever ceasing. In the second year of the same era, soldiers from the land of the Uyghurs invaded the borders of the Tang Empire. In the third year of the same era, the regional commander in the area north of the Yellow River suddenly raised a revolt. Later, the kingdom of Tibet once more refused to obey orders from China, and the Uyghurs repeatedly seized Chinese territory. On the whole, the conflicts and uprising were like those that prevailed at all time when the Qing dynasty and the military leader Xuang Yu were overthrown, and the towns and villages were devastated by fire and other disasters. What was even worse, Emperor Wuzun carried out a vast campaign to wipe out Buddhist teachings and destroyed a great many temples and pagodas. He was never able to put down the uprisings and died of agony shortly after, in agony. This is the essence of Chikaku's original passage. In view of these events, we should consider the fact that Honan belonged to the time of the retired Emperor Gotoba, around the Kenin era, 1201 to 1204. And what happened to the retired emperor is evident before our very eyes. Thus, Tang China provided an earlier example of the fall of an emperor. And our own country offers similar proof. Remember, I already told you, the fall of emperors in Japan and the rise of the shogunate is the period and the age in which Nichiren comes into being. You should neither doubt this nor consider it strange. The only thing to do now is to abandon the evil ways and take up those that are good, to cut off this affliction at the source, to cut it off at the root. The guest, looking somewhat mollified, said, "Though I have not yet probed deeply into the matter, I believe I understand to some degree what you're saying. Nevertheless, throughout the area from Kyoto, the capital, to Kamakura, the headquarters of the shogun, there are numerous eminent Buddhist leaders and key figures in the clergy, and yet none of them has so far appealed to the shogun concerning this affair, or submitted a memorial to the throne. You, on the other hand, a person of humble position, think nothing of spewing out offensive accusations. Your assertions go too far, and your behavior unreasonable." The host, Nichiren, responds, "Though I may be a person of little ability, I have reverently given myself to the study of the Mahayana. A blue fly, if it clings to the tail of a thoroughbred horse, can travel 10,000 miles, and the green ivy that twines around the tall pine, can grow to 1,000 feet. I was born as the son of the one Buddha, Shakyamuni, and I serve the king of teachings, the Lotus Sutra. How could I observe the decline of the Buddhist law and not be filled with emotions of pity and distress? Moreover, the Nirvana Sutra states, if even a good monk sees someone destroying the teaching and disregards him, failing to reproach him, to oust him, or to punish him for his offense, then you should realize that that monk is betraying the Buddha's teachings. But if he ousts the destroyer of the law, reproaches him, or punishes him, then he is my disciple and a true voice hearer." So as a true student, a true monk, a true Buddhist, to stand idly by while people trample the entirety of the teachings, and more to the point, I think, mislead people, that's where I take exception. Everybody will misunderstand things as they are learning. It's natural. But if your goal isn't to get beyond it and learn deeply and question your own understanding, then your potential for misleading others is far too great. And this needs to be addressed. If this is something you see, you must speak up. But understand that I'm a big proponent not only of speaking up, but knowing from which you speak. So if you see somebody doing something that you see as a violation, make sure that you study deeply, that you research the subject so that you yourself can be absolutely clear. And I'm just echoing Shakyamuni Buddha's own words, who told his followers, his students, don't follow me. Don't even follow my words. Read, study broadly so you can make up your own mind, so that you can, through your own mental acuity, your own karmic, mundane, samsaric mind, can come through and reach through your own personal cobwebs to the clarity that I promise you will achieve if you study everything. Those are Shakyamuni's words. And I'm telling you, do the same thing. If somebody misrepresents or seems to you to misrepresent something, this should be cause for your study, not just knee-jerk. Study so that you can prove that person wrong or discover something you'd never considered before. This is how we teach ourselves. This is where teaching happens, by our own commitment. That's why I use the words of a strong mind, a resolute mind, a determination, a conviction, because that's what it's about. It's about knowing, not following, not being told. Okay? Therefore, in order to avoid such charges, I have cited a few general principles and given a rough explanation of the matter. Earlier in the Genin era, 1224 to 1225, petitions to the throne were submitted time and again by the two temples of Enrakuji and Kofukuji, and as a result, an imperial command and a letter of instruction from the shogunate were handed down ordering that the woodblocks used in printing Honin's Nembutsu chosen above all be confiscated and brought to the central lecture hall of Enrakuji, where they were burned in order to repay the debt owed to the Buddhas of the three existences. In addition, orders were given that the menials at Kanjin-in shrine should dig up and destroy Honin's grave. Then Honin's disciple, Rakman, Shoko Jokaku Sasho, and others were condemned by the imperial court to exile in distant regions and were never pardoned. In view of these facts, how can you say that no one has submitted a complaint to the authorities concerning these matters? The guest, continuing to speak in a mild manner now, replied, "One could hardly say that Honin is the only one who disparages sutras and speaks ill of others' priests, since you do the same thing yourself. However, it is true that he takes the 637 Mahayana teachings and 2,883 volumes, along with all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and deities of this world, and urges people to discard clothes, ignore, and abandon them. There is no doubt that these four injunctions are his very words. The meaning of the passage is quite clear. But you keep harping on this one little flaw in the jewel and severely slandering him for it. I do not know whether he spoke out of delusion or out of enlightenment. Between you and Honin, I cannot tell which is the wise and which is the foolish, or determine whose assertions are right and whose are wrong." Isn't this a fascinating dialogue? One that when we start practicing, we might be afraid to engage in. But Nichiren just splays this open. Says, let's get it all on the table. Let me show you what I have seen and see if you can't concur. If you don't learn something in the process, I will listen to your objections, but please listen to my insight and see if you don't agree. It's interesting way to propose a point, and very valuable as a teaching tool, I think. So let's follow along. Looking at the time. However, you assert that all the recent disasters are to be traced to Nembutsu chosen above all, speaking quite volubly on that point and elaborating on the meaning of your assertion. Now surely the peace of the world and the stability of the nation are sought by both ruler and subject and desired by all inhabitants of the country. The nation achieves prosperity through the Buddhist law, and the law is proven worthy of reverence by the people who embrace it. If the nation is destroyed and the people are wiped out, then who will continue to pay reverence to the Buddhas? Who will continue to have resolute mind and conviction in the law? Therefore, one must first of all pray for the safety of the nation and then work to establish the Buddhist law. Now, if you know of any means whereby disasters can be prevented and troubles brought to an end, I would like to hear about it. So the host says, there is no doubt that I am the foolish one. I would never dare claim to be wise. However, I would just like to quote some passages from the teachings that offer some brief thoughts. Man, my reading skills today, marginal. Concerning the means for ensuring order in the nation, there are numerous passages in both Buddhist and non-Buddhist texts, and it would be difficult to cite them all here. Now see, he's following the teachings precisely. He's even saying specifically Buddhist and non-Buddhist. Since taking up the study of Buddhism, however, I have frequently given thought to this matter, and it seems to me that restraining those who slander the law and respecting the followers of the correct way will assure stability within the nation and peace in the world at large. In the Nirvana Sutra, we read, the Buddha said, with the exception of one type of person, you may offer alms to all kinds of persons, and everyone will praise you. Chunda says, what do you mean when you speak of one type of person? The Buddha replied, I mean the type described in this sutra as violators of the precepts. Chunda spoke again, saying, I'm afraid I still don't understand. May I ask you to explain further? The Buddha addressed Chunda, saying, by violators of the precepts, I mean the Ichantika. In the case of all other types of persons, you may offer alms, everyone will praise you, and you will achieve great rewards. Why is that? Because that's the Bodhisattva way. You're helping people. If your help is misused, it's on them. What's an Ichantika, you might ask? I don't know, he may tell you here. Oh, Chunda spoke once more, asking, what is the meaning of the term Ichantika? The Buddha said, Chunda, suppose there should be monks or nuns, laymen or women, who speak carelessly and evil words and slander the correct teachings, and that they should go on committing these grave acts without ever showing any inclination to reform or any sign of repentance in their hearts. Persons of this kind, I would say, are following the path of the Ichantika. In other places, Nichiren describes those people as, or not just Nichiren, he quotes teachings, that they're people of incorrigible disbelief. What does that mean? It's easy, and we all do it at some point in our life. We make our mind up about something, and we don't really take the time to kind of research our own. How did I come to that? How did I come to stand for, don't go, this is my line, I don't cross it? Where did that come from? Why did that get, You hear terms like willful ignorance. That's the same thing. You become willfully stubborn about a point without really being able to justify it, even to yourself. You just stand there, right? That's an ichantika behavior. And the same can be true about certain study, right? I don't get math, I'll never get math, I won't study math. And yet, if you studied it a little bit, you might just be tingled with surprise that, I get it. Why deprive yourself of those moments, right? Again, there are many of those who commit the 4 grave offenses or are guilty of the 5 cardinal sins. I'll let you look those up. And who, though aware that they are guilty of serious faults, from the beginning have no trace of fear or contrition in their hearts, or if they do, give no outward sign of it. When it comes to the correct teachings, they show no inclination to protect, treasure, and establish it over the ages, but rather speak of it with malice and contempt, their words replete with error. People of this kind, too, I would say, are following the path of the ichantika. With the exception of this one group of people called ichantika, however, you may offer alms to all others, and everyone will praise you. Elsewhere in the same sutra, the Buddha spoke in these words: "When I recall the past, I remember that I was a king of a great state in this continent of Jambudvipa. My name was Senyo, and I loved and venerated the great vehicle sutras. My heart was pure and good, and had no trace of evil, jealousy, or stinginess. Good men, at that time I cherished the great vehicle teachings in my heart. When I heard the Brahmins slandering these correct and equal sutras, I put them to death on the spot. Good men, as a result of that action, I never therefore fell into hell." So, I'm going to stop right there because I need to call your attention to something. People might question me when I say that life and death, when they're discussed here as rebirths, this mythology that continues today from Hinduism and before, of reincarnation. Anyway, it's an old fascination. It's cold in here. I want to call your mind to the way the Buddha spoke in this sutra. When I recall the past, and people will say past lifetimes, I remember that I was a king of a great state in this continent of Jambudvipa. Now you're going, see? He was a complete other person. My name was Senyo. He gave himself a name, so this is a previous lifetime. And I loved and venerated the great vehicle teachings. What? So, explain this to me. In a previous lifetime, in a previous place, he venerated the teachings he's now giving you for the first time ever. I don't know what your understanding of time and space is, but isn't he making it obvious that the previous life he's talking about is a previous understanding as to how he experienced and saw the world? And he's now saying that from that previous understanding, these were the teachings I spoke to you last week? That's what he's saying. My heart was pure and good, and it had no trace of evil, jealousy, or stinginess. I wasn't trying to mislead. Good men, at that time I cherished the great vehicle teachings in my heart. That's present tense. When I heard the Brahmins slandering these correct and equal teachings, I put them to death on the spot. He didn't kill them. He put them to death in his mind, in his place of understanding. Good men, as a result of that action, I never therefore fell into hell. My life wasn't perturbed in the least. I felt secure, and I felt more resolute and more conviction, because I took that mental step and put those teachings away as inappropriate and understood that I was heading in the right direction here and now. I know it's confusing. This is why I do this. I know it's confusing, and I know I may be one person who's uniquely qualified to clear it up, and now you're uniquely qualified. Welcome. No, I'm not trying to falsely put importance to me. I'm just saying that this is my motivation to talk to you. Is that I read this and oh man, I so get it. And I just want to share it with you because I think you get it too. I think if you don't, it's only because some loudmouth like me hasn't come along yet and go, look. I feel a little bit, I feel like get Nichiren on this point because he can't keep silent. I'm not trying to emulate him or copy him, but I see a similarity. It makes me laugh because we're all a little Nichiren, aren't we? Are we? Anyway, with that, I'm going to close this lesson, video, talk, whatever. And again, I can't tell you how much I appreciate the opportunity to do this and share this stuff with you. Thank you. Thank you for all your comments on YouTube. All of you, I appreciate you so much. I may have to do something to list all your names or something. I don't know. It's kind of a vanity, but I just want you guys to know how much I appreciate you, okay? Have a wonderful day. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, friends.